Consumers want to know the facts about the products they buy, but America's agricultural landscape is not easy to navigate. Between different companies, scientific advancement, government regulations, advertisement campaigns, and an unhealthy amount of myth and misconception, anyone would be hard-pressed to make sense of it. That's where Real Ag comes in. From the producers who make your food, to the store where you buy the final product, and everything in between. This is Real Ag. Now, here's your host, Kyle Bauer.
We all love our pets and want them to have the best care, and that includes what we feed them. So what are the regulations and standards for pet food, and how is it manufactured? We're going to speak with an agribusiness development director as well as some pet food equipment manufacturers to answer all of these questions and more on this pet food episode of Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from
the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.
Is the pet food industry regulated, and if so, by who?
Yes, the pet food industry is highly regulated, especially when it comes to food safety. It falls under that category. So they have to follow all the guidelines through the Food Safety Administration, and actually the standards can be even higher than some human-related food processing.
Are there differences between canned and dry food?
Yes, mainly the difference between canned and dry food is the moisture content. No differences as far as safety. They all have to follow the strictest regulations and policies when it comes to food safety and quality assurance. But really the ingredients are relatively the same. Obviously there's different qualities of pet food.
Can you tell us about refrigerated pet food?
That is one of the growing trends. The pet food industry here in Kansas is over $7 billion in economic impact. And one of the trends that they are seeing is people are looking at their pets, obviously like their children, and they want the highest quality food. So to them, the freshest would be ingredients that are refrigerated. And obviously, though, that comes with a price tag, and who's willing to pay for that, are more progressive and, obviously socioeconomically able to pay for that pricey dog food.
Is refrigerated pet food better than canned pet food?
I don't know if, I think it all is partly perception, but it is something that, because it's not a shelf-stable product, it is fresher. There's nothing added to it. I think, again, it's what you're looking for, what you want to feed your pet. The stuff that's manufactured and put on the shelves is obviously shelf stables, and again, all the vitamin and mineral requirements and the health requirements for pets has to be attained on either the canned and dry dog food on the shelf or what's in the refrigerated section.
When we talk about grain-based products, are we talking about our animals being on a vegetarian diet?
Grain-based diets are not necessarily totally grain-based. It's just that makes up the bulk of the ingredients within the product. If you're reading your labels, usually the first ingredient listed is what has the highest percentage within the formulation. I would say that it's a mixture of a meat byproduct as well as grains, and then vegetables, and then the added vitamins and minerals if they need to supplement. So it really doesn't put your pet on a vegetarian diet. However, there are certain pet foods that are strictly labeled either vegetarian or gluten-free, meaning it doesn't have any added grain sources in it.
If you're talking about meat-based pet food, where do the byproducts come from?
A lot of the byproducts for meat-based pet foods are coming out of our packing facilities, meat packing facilities. So the rendered products that we don't have any use for human consumption is just either ground or processed, further cooked, and put into the pet food formulations then.
If it's not good enough for human consumption, how is it good enough for animal consumption?
We have to remember that, humans' digestive systems are different than our pets. And if you remember, the pets have been domesticated. So out in the wild, they weren't picky as far as what they were eating. And it was really survival of the fittest. So if there was a scrap, whether you would eat it or I would eat it, the dog or cat probably wouldn't care. It was just their source of nutrition and being able to survive.
Is pet food imported from foreign countries?
No, not necessarily. There may be some ingredients that come in, but again, we have a huge source of resources in the United States in order to meet the supply and demand of the manufacturers. And so I think it's on a very small basis. However, we do export quite a bit of pet food and our ingredients to other countries to manufacture pet food for their consumers.
Who do we mainly export to?
Probably the largest ones would be in Asia. That's one of the most growing markets. There are several different pet food shows or forums. There's one in Europe, there's one in Asia, and there's also one specifically for the China region.
Do many of these companies have veterinary nutritionists on staff?
Yes, because the formulation either has to be, or recipes need to be either run through a nutritionist to make sure that it is exactly what the pet needs. And there's different levels, most food is fed out to your pets based on weight of the animal. So you want to make sure that you're feeding the correct amounts. And then the veterinarians, just like our beef feedlots and such, have consulting veterinarians, consulting nutritionists. If they don't have one on premise, then they go to the experts, which would be at the university level or consulting vets and nutritionists out in the field.
How can one be sure the vitamin and mineral content of a food is safe?
Vitamins and minerals, again, are regulated through the food safety monitoring system. So everything that gets put into a pet food has to be of the right quality, the right consistency, the right amount. And these manufacturers, like I said, some of these facilities are probably more regulated than some human ones. Not to say that the human ones are bad, our food processing facilities, but there's been some issues in the past and they wanted to overcome them because nobody ever wants to see something happen to their pet because, again, they're part of the family.
Across Kansas, is pet food production and manufacturing a huge moneymaker?
It's a huge moneymaker for the state of Kansas. Again, $7 billion worth of economic impact to the state. It employs almost 20,000 workers, and that includes everything from ingredient procurement to buyers of equipment manufacturing, the actual processing of the food. It is predominantly in the northeast sector of Kansas, but we have some facilities that are out by Great Bend, and then in the southeast by Frontenac. There's some really great facilities all throughout the state.
Food industry, not pet care or anything else, is about an $80 billion industry worldwide. 26 or 27 billion of that is in the United States. Then I don't know that there are any data that talks about specifically by the state of Kansas yet, although I do know that the state is working on that as far as economic development. But quite a few of the primary pet food producers, the brands that the consumers see in the marketplace, have either headquarters here or have major manufacturing factories here. Most of the supply, equipment supply, vendors upstream and downstream of Winger are also located in Kansas. Universities such as Kansas State really, of course, focus on food and feed science. Kansas State also has a pet food minor program, which has been very important, not only for Winger and for other vendors that are supporting the pet food market. It is, I think, very well understood at the state level, at the legislative level, that pet food as an economy is really vibrant in Kansas, and it's something that Kansas, in fact, from the cereal grain production all the way to equipment manufacturing to the actual production of the food, pet food is really something that the state of Kansas can excel in. Domestically, pet food it continues to grow. It's typically single-digit growth. But the value of that market is continuing to grow. Pet food has become more expensive as consumers treat the pets more like their own children. So the value and the importance of food safety, food quality and control, all of those things are very important. So the value add of pet food continues to grow. The science, the technology behind it continues to grow in importance. And again, something that the state of Kansas is very well situated to continue to capitalize on as we continue to learn more about formulation, cereal grains, other types of crops that are nutritious for pets. That will continue to grow.
Are new pet foods tried on a certain aspect, or how is it that they make it into the point that we can buy them on a local level?
There are panels, so to speak, where researchers and the cooks of these recipes and manufacturers of the new pet foods, when they come up with a new formulation, they actually test it out on pets. Now, I don't know if that's a voluntary basis where you can bring your pet in, like some food sensory panels that humans participate in, or if it's actually something that they may go and just gather a group of dogs or cats, but they look at palatability, flavor, shape and size of the kibble or even the chunks in a can. All of that is analyzed, and it actually goes through through an animal testing period.
How long is that process from start to finish before we see that product make its way to our shelf?
I would say it takes quite a bit of research to get new formulas into practice. I'm not an expert in that field. That would definitely have to rely on the pet food manufacturers. But just like with any new food product, it has to go through extensive testing. Again, make sure nutritional content is where it needs to be. And then by the time you get through doing your test batches and then the sensory test on it with the animals, and then there's always packaging and labeling and then a marketing plan and a lot of different these. So I would say, they could very well be a year or more in the making.
How long has Winger been established?
Company was started in 1935 here in Sabetha by two brothers, Joe and Lou Winger. So Winger Manufacturing is part of what we call the Winger Group. The Winger Group is made up of multiple different organizations underneath it, Winger being one of them, Extra Tech as well being under them, as being somewhat of a competitor and a partner in the market of extrusion, and also a very large player in pet food. Another group that we've got is Source Technology in Denmark. They make inline sampling equipment, so doing things like moisture and bulk density and various other tests inline out in the plant. Overall, we have about $150 million in sales in Winger Group. What else?
One group that we also have is CPS. That's called Corporate Project Services.
Always bump that under Winger.
And that's just an example of, we started in equipment, providing extruders and dryers, but that's now, spun into more of plant layout and providing a service and a solution to our employees. So we don't want to always just give them hardware and equipment, but we also want to give them some knowledge work as well. So that's turned into plant layout, expertise on how to set our equipment in your facility, but also upstream and downstream. So we've got a group that's growing in CPS. They got different salesmen and draftsmen located worldwide who are helping with plant layouts and process flows through a plant. We say our secret sauce is basically our people and the relationships we build. So it's not so much what we make. Anybody can make, extruders or dryers, but we have the people behind it. So we pretty much pride ourselves on that and really look for that relationship when it comes to making a sale, and then all the way through servicing our equipment, providing services and opportunities for the client to ultimately succeed. Ultimate credit to God, and by God's grace, we continue in a very faith-based organization. That's where we were founded on. That's where we continue to find our strength and guidance in that. So another thing that we really focus on is the 3 I's. That's integrity, initiative, and ingenuity. And when it comes to hiring people, we always say that we can train into skill, but if they don't have those 3 I's, then we're not interested, because it's those 3 I's that we set our direction on, and that's kind of the backbone of our organization. So we feel like if we are really focusing on those 3 I's, the rest will come. So we are very community-minded. We realize that the only way we exist is, again, by our people. And so therefore that's reaching out in the community. Just for example, these last couple of days, we spent quite a bit of time doing tours for the local high school. And the idea behind that is not even if they come work for Winger, that's not our concern. Our concern is that these kids are seeing and realizing the mass amount of opportunities that exist in Northeast Kansas for a great job. And that's every skill set, whether that be a 4-year licensed engineer or a 1-year tech school kid that wants to come out and weld or do something like that. There's tons of opportunities and availability to make amazing income and build a family. So we want to reach out and help those kids in those communities.
Are there regulations and government agencies involved in the manufacturing?
As far as manufacturing regulation, there is multiple different things that govern such as like a steam regulation and different pressure regulations. I mean, there's standards and regulations as far as governing how things are manufactured and made, principles, things like that.
Are the products that you produce here all start to finish, or are they shipped in from other places?
Certain components of our equipment are purchased, like motors and certain valves and other sensory equipment on our machines, but about 80% of the equipment is manufactured.
How many employees does Winger employ? I'd say here in Sabetha it's about 250 to 300. Worldwide it's 350.
When you say worldwide, how far does that stretch?
Stretches globally. We've got employees, I believe, on 5 continents.
Are there regulations for shipping overseas for what you do?
There are. Yes, that was the main reason why we actually have a manufacturing plant in Brazil, and the idea behind that was some of the high taxes to ship our equipment into the country. So therefore, we have a manufacturing plant there to avoid some of that.
The equipment used for pet food, is it similar to what is used for human food?
The principle of serial extrusion, can be applied to aquatics, pet food, but also human food as well. So the principle is all very similar.
Are name brand pet food companies your main focus as far as manufacturing goes?
The pet food develops, or consumes a majority of the business. It's about 60% of our business is in the pet food market. So we have a lot of focus in there, but we're also, very well focused in the aquatic market and human food market as well.
Was Winger created from the need for pet food?
No, I wouldn't say it was driven from it. It was driven from animal feed.
Okay.
So the brothers started mixing molasses and roughage, or hay, together to make a palatable feed. It was back in the Great Depression, so feed was an issue. So that's where the company really started, in the ag feed.
How did Winger start moving into aquatic food and human food equipment production?
We had the capabilities to do it. The principles aren't a lot different. So we've just kind of reached out into those markets. So aquatic feeds for tuna, shrimp, catfish, salmon feeds, tilapia feeds, various warm water, cold water, floating, sinking feeds all around the world. It's all farmed. Our equipment, we've got a wide range of capacity ranges for it, anywhere from 500 kgs an hour on some of the smaller test lab equipment for pet food, up to 20 to 30 tons per hour for aquatic feed. And kind of the trends we're seeing in that aquatic feed, they want the high capacity, they want to increase production, and we're starting to slightly see a decline in that in the pet food market, where they want smaller runs and more niche product, and not just that 10 or 15 tons per hour production line.
Some of the trends of aquaculture, which we typically think of as being ocean-based or southeast U.S., the trends of aquaculture moving to inshore aquaculture and the impact that could have for the state of Kansas. Again, Kansas is ideally situated, large land mass, empty spaces, all the cereal grain commodities, the equipment, the supply. We've got everything that we need to really be focused on inland aquaculture.
Yeah, inland pet or fish feed, production is definitely increasing, where they have ponds, within inland, I guess.
Yeah, we've seen it. We've kind of seen it started down south in Mississippi or Louisiana or Arkansas, in that what we call catfish country, where these farmers, maybe they had a bad year and they said, we're going to get out of crops, we're going to put ponds in on our fields. They're going to start growing catfish right there out in the middle of a field. So I think that market could expand and could continue to creep further in the U.S.
That's that's the direction it is going. The catfish country, as we talked about, was primarily commodity based, high volumes of catfish at a competitive price. But what inland aquaculture, especially indoor aquaculture, will really bring to the Midwest is the higher value species, the better quality, more control over the feed ingredients that are being fed to that species, better quality control over the water, better quality control over the entire food chain. So the inland aquaculture, and especially the indoor aquaculture, is really a growing area.
Does the equipment you produce work into the livestock side of production?
We do offer one piece of equipment called the UPC, and that is more for livestock feeds or for swine feeds. It's more of a pelleting machine. But as far as extrusion, we really don't touch into livestock.
What is extrusion?
What's it? I mean, Galen's crazy.
So I guess extrusion is basically the processing of raw cereal grains and cooking of those. So basically, a raw grain is not digestible in the state of itself. So we subject it to moisture and steam to cause gelatinization, is what it's called. And basically, that's breaking down the structures of cells within starch and expanding those to take on water, and that makes them digestible. And then through that process, they then enter into the extruder barrel, where they're introduced to high shear and temperature as well. And those are continued to cook that gelatinization, the starches, to make them more of a digestible product and form a dough. So then through the mixing and the steam, they get kneaded together to make it a dough, basically just like any other baking process in the kitchen. And as that dough then comes into the extruder, it hits atmosphere, and it's called flash off. So the moisture then flashes off and creates a puff, and then it's cut at the die. So there you basically have a cooking process, in short, and a raw grain goes through a cooked product, and then it needs to be baked. So that's when it enters the dryer, and then it's basically baked. All the moisture is pulled out to, for different processes, anywhere from 6 to 8%. And the reason for that, if it's high moisture in the bag, it's going to spoil and rot. So we pull that moisture out to keep the moisture content down, and it's a edible product.
Two different styles of extruders: single screw extruders and then twin screw extruders. Twin screws typically take longer just because we have double the elements. You've got two sets of shafts, two sets of screws. You've got a more complex head design. So it's not really a complexity, just longer because of the amount of stuff we have to make.
Do you see your product manufacturing starting to focus on the smaller consumer?
Yeah, I could see it going to the smaller consumer, and that consumer more focusing on the quality of their product and focusing on that niche and not the overall quality or overall quantity. Just higher margin products.
We hope you've learned a little bit about the regulations, manufacturing, and testing of pet food on this episode of Real Ag. It's up to you to choose the quality, standard, and freshness of food you wish to feed your pet, and regulatory agencies can only go so far to ensure what you get from production to bowl is a safe and nutritious product. Remember, if you want to check out this and more episodes of Real Ag, go to smokyhillstv.org. I'm Kyle Bauer, and this has been Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from
the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.